Men get told all the time that their testosterone levels are normal. But here's the thing, normal does not mean optimal. It's not just about chasing a number on a lab report. It's about improving the systems that drive your hormones, sleep, stress, muscle mass, nutrition, recovery, because real optimization isn't about a prescription. It's about restoring the balance to how your body is designed to perform. So welcome back to In the Gray Area with Revv Health. I'm Britni.
And I'm Travin.
And today we're diving into testosterone levels. We're talking about what is normal and what is optimal.
Yeah, I was listening to you during your intro and I just kept thinking about like, why would anyone want to be normal? And it's like, you can say that about anything in life really, but specifically with what we're talking about in testosterone levels, it's like, I was like picturing in my head when you were talking and like, when we're sitting in an airport, right? And it's like, let's say, you go to an airport and you just randomly select 100 people, right? And that's a good average of like our population, right? And you can take those 100 people and you could take, let's say like 100 like high level athletes and set them aside, right? Like which two groups do you want to be compared to, right? Do you want like the normal testosterone level or do you want the testosterone level of like this high performing athlete over here?
Optimal. Yeah.
It's just like, I look at it that way and it's so crazy to me why people just settle for like just normal health.
I think we can talk about that in a second because there's many things that come into play when we hear that. It's like they don't want to take something forever. Mm-hmm. We hear that all the time, which is crazy. Or they're scared, And so like I know for myself when I first did it was back in 2019 and I didn't know anything. Yeah. I just knew after going through everything that I went through as a female, I started hearing things about like testosterone and the importance of testosterone for women, which I think still a lot of women aren't aware of. Yeah. They think of just like as a male sex hormone. But when I first initially got the benefits of which it was a pellet, which we do not suggest, but initially when it kicked in, I felt amazing. Mm-hmm. And feeling that way again was incredible. Mm-hmm. So I think that's something that like so many people are just missing out on.
Yeah. Yeah.
And our body should be running on these levels.
Mm-hmm. It's crazy. Like, yeah. And we talk about the decline all the time and how often it's like somewhat of a slow progression over 10, 20, 30 years or whatever the case may be. And so sometimes it's not as noticeable to people, right? Of how far they've fallen. But, when you put it back in, and you feel the difference, like that's when it really gets eye-opening to a lot of people. It's just like, oh my gosh, like it makes such a difference in your impact. And like we hear that a lot from women on pellets too. And like that's one of the things that we always go back to. It's like, you felt that way at first. Yeah. And then not so much later, but still it just goes to show you that like replacing those missing hormones and like bringing them up into really, really optimal levels makes such a big impact.
So when it comes to numbers too on labs, for women and men, it's different. Mm-hmm. We see men all the time that come in with what we would call extremely low levels and looking even at their like free testosterone versus even their total, which we know that general doctors are only going off the total, even when those numbers are low. Yeah. But for women, there's never a number that's like low and deficient for women. Yeah. So, I mean, it's really, really sad on both sides.
Yeah. It is much harder for women to kind of show the bit to show like where they need to be because typically it is so much higher than the range is. Whereas men, it still is higher than the range, but a lot of times women, I mean, you're talking like it's significantly higher than the top of the range. And so it's kind of hard for some women to wrap their head around and even guys too, for, when they see like, oh, like I should be double where the top of the range is. Sometimes it's like, well, why? Why? Like this, I want to be in this normal range for whatever reason. Like it just seems silly to me that you want to be like, people need to understand like those numbers aren't saying like this is where you should be based on like the scientific evidence of what's the most healthy and optimal. It's saying this is an average of our population. That's all. That's all it is. It's not saying this is where you should be. It's just saying this is the normal range of our population, which we know is very unhealthy, very overweight, very sick, very insulin resistant. And so it's reflective in those numbers. We talk all the time about like 30 years ago, the range was double what it is today. Mm-hmm.
But you just said something too, like insulin resistance. I think a lot of people, they aren't even aware of what that really looks like. And nowadays, like for women, 2 out of 3 women have PCOS, that's insulin resistance and stuff. So you wouldn't look at me and think that I have insulin resistance, but I do. And that's something I struggle with. And so even my levels, I remember when I first went in, my total was like 29 and my free was like 2.3 or something like that.
Yeah.
And, you know, gradually as it went up, and even as much as we've learned, even before we went through the training that we went through with Dr. Rousier and stuff, I wasn't even aware for a female where my levels could actually get to and feel good.
Right.
And it didn't happen overnight. It was something that, you know, like, yes, I am well over 1,000 now as a female.
Yeah.
I still look like a female. I sound like a female, but it's like people are not aware of, like you said, like those levels that you need to get to, and why everybody is so different than the next person, because somebody else might not need to be nearly as high as me and feel way better than I do at that number.
Yes. It's just like, again, it goes, I know in the last podcast I talked about, like, I wish sometimes we didn't even have to measure levels after someone started therapy, because it does create this unnecessary fear. You see red and it's so much higher, you know, like in your case, like you never would have thought like, oh, I need to be 30 times higher than what my level is right now, you know, to really feel my best. And like we talk about, like, it is a like higher level, the better you feel often, you know, and there is a point, you know, we need to, we should talk about numbers, and like, there is a difference between, you know, we talk about like optimizing symptoms and feeling good and then balancing that against any unwanted side effects. You know, it's not saying like you can just let your levels go indefinitely, because there is going to be a point where you have you'll have symptoms of excess, which, you know, that might look different for everyone. Like for you, I know, like if you, like, you'll notice if you go like really higher, you know, like you might not feel as good as
for me, like I start to like feel a little irritable is what, if it, and I've played around because I'm like, you know, just trying to see where that sweet spot is. And I found it. And so I know, but my levels are high. Yeah. But it's like, I know that if it goes higher than that, then I will feel like irritable and on edge. Yeah. So
then you back down your dose, and it's like, then that's your dose. And that's, you know, that's
but there's nothing unsafe about it.
Exactly. And that's where I was going to get to. It's like, you know, these are hormones, and there is, you know, let's look at like the bodybuilding world, for example, right? And I bring that up a lot because there is a ton of abuse that occurs, right? And let's talk about testosterone. Like, those men have been abusing testosterone for decades, right? And we don't see any, you know, people are going to say like, oh, well, you know, this bodybuilder died or this one doesn't. It's like, yes, again, there's a lot of polypharma going on and other synthetic drugs, and there's other reasons why, but like testosterone levels will go through the roof, and it's like, no one's dropping dead, or there's not any harm from testosterone. They're going to get symptoms of excess, but to them, like, that doesn't matter, because their goal isn't to feel good. Their goal is to just put on as much muscle as possible. So they're going to keep pushing through that, versus like when you're using it for health optimization, right? It's about balancing all the good with any sort of negative side effects that you have. And then that's where your, you know, dose, or if you want to look at your level, then that's where it's at. But it's irrelevant what that number is, because it's going to be different for everyone. But
yeah. And I think one thing you just said, like, kind of stuck out to me is it takes time to get those benefits. So you can't just like start taking hormones and think that in 2 months, not only are you going to be running optimally, but you're now going to get all this protection and benefits. And, you know, like you're getting these benefits, but it takes time. And generally, like, it really takes like a good 1.5 years of being consistent with your hormones. And we're going to see a huge difference in the first couple of months. But then we're going to see a huge difference at 6 months, and at 9 months, and at 12 months, and then 18 months. So it's a commitment. Yeah. Like, if you want those benefits, you're going to continue to do the process.
Yeah. And that's what I always go back to. Like, if you're looking for, you know, goals or something to measure, you know, like, don't, like, I hate measuring a testosterone level. Like, let's measure like lipids and lipoproteins. Let's measure, you know, blood pressure. Let's measure waist circumference. Let's measure visceral fat. Like, let's measure those and say like, hey, whatever dose I need to be at to get these results, that's what my level needs to be at. Right? You're not just aiming blindly for some random number.
But we never see on follow-up labs, like, where there isn't a huge improvement with cholesterol, especially, and LDL coming down as well.
Exactly. But you only see that when you raise the level high enough to achieve that. You know, if you're raising, as a guy, like, I'm sorry, but like, if you're raising your level from 400 to 700, like, you're not going to see those benefits. Like, you're just not, it's not going to be enough. And it's like, people don't understand that, but it's like, the higher the level, the higher the benefit. We talk about this all the time.
Yeah. That's why when we recently had somebody that, I think they were in the 900s or something, but their free wasn't even amazing. And they thought that it was great and that they didn't need anything, but they're like over 35 and probably declining and stuff. So the mentality just isn't there yet because they're probably not experiencing those negative side effects that some others are.
Yeah.
When we see like 19-year-olds come in that have testosterone levels of grandpa, it's crazy. It's quite different too.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. I mean, it is going to be different in terms of like people feeling negative from low testosterone. Like that is going to look different for everyone. And like there's guys that will have, you may have a 400 testosterone level and you might feel much better than a guy with a 700 or 800 level. Like, just there's so many things that we go into when we talk about it. Like you'd mentioned like sex hormone binding globulin earlier. There's, receptor site resistance. There's all, there's insulin resistance. There's tons of things that like go into like how your testosterone levels affect you and how your body responds to it.
And each person's body functions differently.
Yep.
So another thing too, I know for females especially, it's hard because they come and they're like, I've got all this weight, I'm like gaining in the midsection, and testosterone is always like our go-to. That's going to like help with visceral fat and metabolism, all that kind of stuff. Yes. But it takes time.
Yeah.
And so that's really, really hard. We live in a society right now that wants like that quick fix, instant gratification, which, we do have GLPs that help with that as well. So that's something that we will encourage people to look into when starting if they want that instant, because it really is going to take time. That's one of the last things, especially for women, that we see the benefit in is like a decrease in visceral fat, and especially the midsection.
Yeah. And it does take the most time. And that's, and like coincidentally, like that's a lot of the health benefits are going to come from the reduction in visceral fat. And so it does like, you need to be patient with that stuff. And like, fortunately, you do get a lot of the feel good effects much earlier. And so, that's what a lot of people are looking for too. So like, it is good because, honestly, if it were, it's sad to say, but people are like the way that we think, if it were the other way around and it took much longer to get the feel good benefits, people might not stay on the therapy.
That's true.
And so it's kind of good that keeps them, that keeps them in it and they get that continued progress.
Yeah. I know that one of the first things I hear is about libido too, like whether it's men or women. And I feel like, and maybe I'm wrong, but I feel like men tend to always get that benefit. That's something that they see. Yeah. And where women, most of the time they do, but we still sometimes, and part of me thinks that it's almost like we talked about earlier, like not pushing that level high enough and getting, because some women do need a lot higher testosterone level in order to get those benefits with libido.
Yeah. Yeah, they do. And again, like application process matters.
Yeah.
What you're, the form you're using, where you're applying it, we know that matters a lot, but I think just, we've done episodes on this, but there's, I think there's a lot more that goes into women's libido than men, right? We're a lot simpler. And so
a little more mental for women.
Yeah. And so it does correct a lot of times with men, and with women, we always go back to saying like, if your libido is low because of testosterone, like it will correct itself, but there might be more that goes into it than that.
Absolutely. And that's a hard conversation sometimes to have.
Yeah. But libido and sexual function too, like for men, like it goes hand in hand.
And that's a question we ask a lot, like, which I think guys are a little caught off guard when they're asked, like, how often are you waking up with morning wood? It's like a lot of times it's like maybe once a week. Like,
yeah. And it's one of those things we talk about, like a gradual decline. And that's one of those things that happens probably, gradually for guys, to where it's like, it's not something you're thinking about because it's just like slowly over time. It's like, okay, maybe, you go from when you're younger every day to then you're maybe like, most days, then every other day, then it just like declines to where you're not really thinking about it. And you can see the light bulb go off in guys' head when you ask them that. And it's probably like, they haven't really thought about that probably in forever.
No.
But it's like, oh wait, yeah, I don't really wake up like that anymore like I used to.
When you're saying that, it's making me think of like all these 19 and 20 and 21-year-olds that we talk to, and they've never experienced waking up every day.
Yeah.
And they think it's abnormal and weird.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, we talked about this before, but like, there's a reason that your body does, like, as a guy, like that does that throughout the night. And part of the reason is to like, it keeps like that, like vasculature system, like healthy. Right. And it keeps, and so like, it's like a use it or lose it type of thing. And so when you're not, if your erections are happening like less and less and less, like your ability to achieve erection is going to decrease also, because it's like, imagine like if you're not working out a muscle, it's going to get weaker. It's like that same concept.
Yeah. Scary. I think, we kind of talk about symptoms and stuff like that, but we don't talk enough about like lack of motivation and stuff. Cause that's something like mood, motivation, everything that we see. And we see it all the time, but like even in this younger generation, we're seeing like more and more and more.
Yeah. There's a myriad of things that go into that. And we did an episode like a while back talking about that. I mean, like hormones definitely is a huge factor. And then, there's a lot of other, environmental things and just social things and lifestyle things that are affecting that too. But I mean, like when you're like a young man and you're developing and you have kind of like that surge of testosterone and like DHT through puberty, and it's like those are the two that, the DHT is the hormone that's like gives like men that drive and that motivation and like, competitiveness and all that. And it's like these kids, a lot of them just aren't getting that.
Yeah. So they're fatigued. They have no like drive and ambition. But that also reminds me of one of our patients who I think like around 45 now and very active in jujitsu and stuff. And that was one of the things, like he was kind of resistant to start with us, but then one of the first things he noticed in the first month, he's like, my endurance is incredible. I can go like a whole hour. And I'm like, I don't know what they call it, wrestling. I don't know. With his matches for like an hour long and can actually like has the endurance to do that and stuff. Yeah. So that's really cool and incredible to see as well. And a lot of people don't talk about that enough. No.
Yeah. He loved it for that. I mean, look, it's like we don't prescribe it for the performance enhancing benefits, but it absolutely. I mean, it's like you can't sit there and carve those out and pretend they don't exist. Like we use testosterone to, optimize health and symptoms of deficiency, but you are going to get performance enhancing, benefits that come from that. I mean, you just are. And so it is going to be things like, increased muscle mass and endurance and, stamina. And so, yeah, I mean, it's like, he loves it for that reason.
Yeah, everybody should.
Yeah.
One thing also is we talk a lot about how when men are taking testosterone, how it converts into estradiol. And it's interesting enough that it does not do that for women. And that was something that I just like, it never makes sense to me that why if women take it, it doesn't. And I know that sometimes women do come to us and still they don't feel comfortable. Like maybe they've had breast cancer or something. Yeah. And so they're not comfortable with taking estradiol, which, we want everybody to feel comfortable with whatever they're doing. But understanding that even introducing testosterone is going to benefit them, and it's not going to convert into estradiol like it does for men.
Yeah, it does. It just, it's the, when you give it exogenously, it seems to suppress the aromatase enzyme in women. And if they're not making, if they're menopausal and they're not making it on their own anymore, then they're not like their estrogen levels are going to be suppressed. So on testosterone therapy.
Yeah. I always think that's just crazy.
Yeah. But, I will just piggyback on that. And it's like, since we're talking about this episode and you mentioned that, but it's like really, really want guys to understand that like testosterone itself, it only works directly on your muscle tissue and building muscle. So like all of the health benefits, all of the feel good effects, like all the sexual function benefits, like everything comes from either estradiol or DHT, right? Those are the active hormones that testosterone works through. And so again, like, it's so crazy to me, the thought of like, why would you want to be blocking these hormones? If that's the whole intention is to improve like how you feel and your health outcomes, but like you're going to block one of those hormones, or some guys block both. Some guys are blocking the DHT and the estradiol. It's like,
but crazy. they don't know what they don't know.
Yeah.
So they have to be their advocate for their own health.
Yeah.
That goes, we always are talking about lab numbers don't matter, but I think it's really important that people understand that they're not trying to chase that number. It's really 100% about symptom relief, and they shouldn't even be worried about anything that has to do with a number. And they should not be like working with somebody that specializes it and then taking their labs to their general practitioner and think that they're even going to get a healthy response because they're not. And we've never seen that.
No.
Especially when it comes to like when they see numbers and they talk about like cardiovascular, they have no clue.
Yeah. Yeah. Most of them probably have no idea that, like when we talk about like the Traverse study and how like, the FDA has now completely reversed their stance on, the cardiovascular impact of testosterone. And I know there's a lot of providers that still aren't even aware of that because they still talk about how it's harmful like that in that way.
But they legitimately think that what we offer is dangerous. and that we are harming people.
Yeah. It's like we hear, like, no joke, like this is, it's shocking to even say this, but like we hear patients like quite frequently that will like, they'll do that, what you said, like they'll share their labs with their doctor, and their doctor will like freak out on them at the high testosterone level. But
So they want to back off.
But completely ignore the improvement in all the other actual like health markers that we know are risk factors. And it's like, wait, it's like you don't even acknowledge like all this improvement over here, but you're worried about this number right here being high.
Well, we did have a patient that challenged the doctor that way and said, well, how come you haven't talked about any of the improvements over here?
He's like, look, I've lost 40 pounds. My cholesterol looks better than it's ever been. Like my body fat's reduced, you know, and she's like, just wanted to focus on his testosterone.
Yeah, she just wanted it below 900. Yeah. I would just really encourage each and every one of you that if you have any of these symptoms that we talked about today, like find somebody that you trust and get your lab work done and address these issues, because you don't have to live this way and you can live with a very good quality of life. So I want to thank you for tuning in with us. And like always, please like, share, comment, subscribe, and we will see you next time. Thank you.